Dear Diary, today I decided to make a video idea that is probably so controversial that what little people do still come by will probably want to leave. Wait, I'm recording? No, I'm not. Hey guys, it's been a hot minute since I've done an essay, but I think it's time that we sat down at the big kids table and talked about something that is really going to hurt. Halo isn't what it used to be. And that's okay. Series can't always be at their peak unless you're Call of Duty, which just seems to never die. Halo is not Call of Duty, however, and I'm very happy that it isn't. But Halo isn't where it used to be, and it's time that we accepted some things that come along with that knowledge. The world has moved on from linear single-player FPS campaigns for the most part, with the outlier really being Doom. But games like Doom aren't just run-and-gun games like Halo has been for the last near 2 decades. They've changed and adapted. I feel BioShock has been more influentially relevant these last 5 years than Halo has in FPS, simply because it said that shooters don't have to be simply guns, grenades, melee, like what's essentially Bible at this point. There isn't a single shooter out there that is just a linear campaign with levels you traverse in small skirmishes in the vein of Halo. Every single shooter has some light RPG mechanics or some sort of video gamey elements to make them rewarding and interesting to play. Take Doom Eternal, for example. This is a game that somehow manages to take what is honestly just a simple mechanic of running and gunning, and they built puzzles out of it. Environmental puzzles, boss fighting puzzles, etc. It took FPS dynamics to a level that I wasn't really aware they could even reach. But that's not even enough for me. I believe that Halo is in deeper water than Doom, because it's something that was touted as being innovative and creative about how it went about world design and gameplay, releasing title after title with very limited expansion of what it could do within its confines. It reminds me of another franchise that had the same problem. What could I be talking about? Alright, let me level with you. I'm not super into Megaman. I've played and enjoyed it pretty thoroughly, but just know that I only really have a cursory knowledge of the series, and Mega Man X is the one that really pulled me. But why Mega Man X? You see, all the games coming prior to Mega Man X were these kind of incrementally different entries with a very similar visual design and art direction. There were just only so many ways that you could just side-scroll, jump, and shoot somebody before it got stale. It also got stale well before Capcom got introspective and started thinking about creative solutions to their problems. But creative solutions they much did find. That sentence sucked. In 1993, Mega Man X released, and with it, a newfound interest in the Mega Man franchise. Suddenly, the Mega Man cartoon by Ruby Spears was introducing X traveling back in time to help the original Mega Man in his troubles. So you can see that this was something that was effective, but I'd rather show you than just tell you. Doubling back on my initial point about how repetitive that the original Mega Man games had gotten, it was the perfect example of if it ain't broke, don't fix it, only being a temporary solution. How many times can you watch the same movie, read the same book, sing the same song? Eventually, we as humans grow tired of consistency to an extent, and as a result, we begin to crave something new and different. Let's just take a look here and think really critically about it. We've got a franchise that more or less has followed a very straightforward path, and in its aging years began to see itself as stagnant and repetitive, consistently leaning on a very samey level design and gameplay loop that limits the amount of creative and unique experiences you can have. Here's where most people would fail the litmus test of truly evolving a franchise. Most would simply see that and say, just get rid of all the mechanics and change the franchise at its very core. Well, I'm going to be a gamer nerd and say screw that mindset. You can evolve a franchise at its core without compromising what makes it unique. Look no further than Mega Man X. This is a franchise that looked at what the old games did and simply said, we need more tools to play with. So what did the geniuses at Capcom do? They not only refined what already worked, they doubled down on it. They streamlined X to give him a much more robust feature set that allowed him to traverse environments in a way that wasn't absurd and was easy for a player to understand. It upped the way that the entire gameplay loop worked by simply just allowing you to think of your environment on a much deeper level, and as a result gave you as the player significantly more agency. Now we have this beautiful and amazing art style to complement a new and fantastic way to play that leaned on the same sort of puzzle-solving element of level traversal that defined the franchise. And we have so many new ways to use that knowledge. But what the hell does that have to do with Halo? You're joking, right? You don't see the Well, fine. I'll spell it out for you. It's 2001. Halo Combat Evolved is released and shown that shooters can be competent even on home consoles. Suddenly we have this knowledge that game consoles can serve as a powerhouse for FPS gaming, and there's a boom of console FPS games that pop up out of nowhere. But even in 2001, if you played Halo Combat Evolved for the first time, and you'd played other FPS games' story modes, you might find that Halo really only acted as a sort of best-of game that featured refined versions of mechanics seen in nearly every other FPS. Halo Combat Evolved's level design wasn't touted because it was new, it was touted because it was the best it had been, the strongest example of existing ideas and concepts. What am I trying to say? Halo Combat Evolved was outdated in 2001, and that is also okay. I love Combat Evolved, and I think it's brilliant, nearly flawless. But to those that act as if it was some sort of groundbreaking moment where FPS transcended its bounds and became something nobody thought possible, that's almost true, but not quite. Now, with all of that in mind, let me ask you something. Why is a game that came out 14 years later relying on the exact same world design and gameplay loop as its original entry? This is something I find isn't really talked about nearly enough. Halo has done the linear campaign. It's done it to death. There's no further evolution that Halo could go through without legitimately compromising its identity as a linear FPS or compromising its core values of gameplay. But answer me this question. Would it really be so bad if Halo stepped outside the box it's put itself in for nearly 20 years? Hypothetically speaking, if Halo Infinite, as it appears to be, legitimately is open world, is even that enough? We've been given vague allusions to this concept of an open-worlded experience, but Chris Lee has contradicted his statement simply by not using the term open-worlded. The demo we were shown in July seems to run completely counter to the idea of an open-world experience. We won't stay on the topic of an open world for too long, because that's not all I think this game needs to be changed, so I'll wrap this thought up. The demo in July was extremely linear, and despite a minimap showing different objectives in other locations, this would even at that point be an extremely limiting way of going about an open world. If you give people simple objectives and no real freedom or agency in how they carry a story, you're making a half measure on your level design and kneecapping yourself from truly being able to broaden your horizons. Now moving on from the subject of open-worldedness, gameplay. This is a tricky one, because it's the closest to heart for all of us, I feel. Halo Infinite seems poised to maintain a relatively similar gameplay feel to Halo 5, and I again feel that is doing a disservice to Halo's sandbox, which hasn't really had a meaningful refinement or addition in ages. We've gotten half-hearted attempts at evolution in the forms of movement systems, armor abilities, etc., but I'm of the opinion that forcing people's hands in situations is essentially taking the easy way out. Now, we don't really know what Halo Infinite does offer, and at this point I'm not fully convinced Halo Infinite is real, mainly because nobody's spotted it in the Pacific Northwest in a while through a camera from the 80s. But there are hints in that July reveal that allude to a world design that rewards exploration and discovery, and on top of all that, allows for creative ways of going about traversal. Take this destroyed UNSC ship, or whatever it may be, for example. Doesn't look like much at a glance, but upon closer inspection, we can see an almost Far Cry-esque rope edge, which almost always signifies that this is a climbable platform. Even this, to me, would be limiting for Halo's sandbox. I want to use my Warthog, or to have a feature that allows Chief to push boxes around, or even pick them up and pile them around to places he isn't supposed to be. Okay, hear me out. For years, we've been using explosives like fusion coils and plasma batteries, brute shots, etc. to get into places we aren't supposed to be. What if Halo Infinite actually had puzzles designed around that, such as a high cliff edge with a brute shot sitting at the bottom of it, or a fusion coil? How about a bridge that is inaccessible without a ramp that you need to use the Warthog to push into place and make your way across? For combat, I feel that there's infinite possibilities. Imagine a pallet holding explosive barrels being suspended on a hill nearby a Covenant encampment. And upon destroying the pallet, the barrels would roll down the hill into the encampment, and you could just fire onto the fusion coils and destroy the entire group. Imagine a scenario where you're watching a group of bandits from a distance, and you can see that the brutes are jet troopers. You take that opportunity to fire at the jetpack on the back of one of the brutes, and he proceeds to go flying off throughout the base, generally causing chaos and killing tons of enemies, just due to the sheer speed that he's traveling at. Imagine that you're watching a cavalry of patrolling ghosts, and you fire a quiet weapon at a nearby explosive, so the ghosts head over to investigate it. And as they're traveling towards said sound, you manage to line up a shot that allows you to snipe all of them in one shot. I'm basically describing The Legend of Halo Breath of the Wild. But at the end of the day, is that so bad? What Breath of the Wild did in opening up world and level design will be studied for decades to come. I think that's easy to see. Mega Man X simply took what worked and built on top of it, because it was such a simple concept to begin with. Now, I understand that me saying that Halo needs to break out of its linearity may seem a bit contradictory to that, but I feel that at its core, Halo has never been about being on a narrow path. It's been about your creativity and agency and how you handle different fighting scenarios. We've never really been made to even think about the environment all that much. I think that putting a bit more focus on that in particular could really be interesting and fun to tinker with. What Mega Man X did for the Mega Man franchise simply cannot be understated. It took everything that was fun and interesting about the Mega Man series and pushed it to the next logical step. Halo has been harping on the same ideas for even longer than Mega Man stuck with its same format for level design, so it's really no wonder that the games aren't really all that appealing to outsiders anymore. There's always going to come a time in a franchise's life where it has to take stock and think about what makes it at its core what it is. Is there some rulebook out there that says that Halo is required to be a linear campaign experience? No, there definitely isn't. So putting the concepts and ideas that a weapons sandbox invites inside of a box doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. Hey guys, been a while since I made one of these bad boys, and inspiration to do so has really been few and far between. I really hope you guys enjoyed this and want to see more like it. As per usual, if you enjoy the content and would like to support me directly, I do have a Patreon that you can support me on with some super cheap tiers and perks that can be used on my official Discord. Now I'll go ahead and give thanks to my supporters on Patreon. I want to thank Nuck and Futz at the $197 tier. I want to thank David Tees at the $10 tier. I want to thank Ryan McCann at the $15 tier, Ghost Warrior at the $5 tier, Screamy at the $15 tier, and Rye at the $12 tier. Thank you guys so much.